Hello and welcome to the ID Talk podcast. I'm Alex Perala and I'm here with my co-host and very good friend, Tony Bitzionis. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Alex. I like that you upgraded me to very good friend this week. I love it.
I'm also very impressed with you at reaching that level. And you know what I think did it? I think it was going to Identity Week America
Yeah.
with you. We just got back. It was a great time, and travel is exhausting, but I'm still feeling the buzz from the show. It was a lot of fun, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I agree. I too am exhausted, and we are doing our best not to sound exhausted because we're very excited to talk about this. I mean, it was an amazing show.
Mhm.
Um, the people that we met, the people that we talked to, some of which you will hear later in this episode, we just had really good conversations. It was a very busy 2 days, and um, I just feel both exhausted and kind of reinvigorated by it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it was great. I mean, like, of course, we talked to a lot of vendors, we talked to government people and stuff like that. But then, like, meeting people in person who we often
Mhm,
talk to on calls, like Maxine
mhm.
Moat from Acuity Market Intelligence, it was great hanging out with her. We got to meet Steve Craig from Peak IDV, really
Yep.
interesting and like fun guy to talk to. I can see why so many people go on his show. And
Yeah.
Evie from Identity Week is so nice and such a smart person to
Yeah.
talk to. It was really great to meet her in person. So yeah, and then of course, we were very busy with our own business, which was our big rebrand, which not ID Talk, which is staying as it is. ID Talk is a great name for this podcast, but our publication, Fine Biometrics, it's time for a new name, and the new name is ID Tech. We're going to be talking a lot more about that in the weeks to come. We have a number of partners, founding partners, who believe in this new vision for our brand. Probably should mention them: Anonybits, Authentic ID, HID, FaceTec, Neurotechnology, and Tech5. They've been really great supporting our change, and basically the idea is like this is really going to be about biometrics going on as it always has been, but there's a lot of other technologies that are related and adjacent and intersecting with the biometric space, and it all kind of adds up to identity and identity technology. And so
Exactly.
we're going with ID Tech. By the time you hear this, you can probably go to idtechwire.com to find our homepage. But regardless, if you want to just keep typing in findbiometrics.com, it'll redirect there. So no worries if you're just used to autocomplete. But yeah, but that having been said, we had to give a presentation about it. I had the opportunity to moderate a panel with people from the TSA and Air Canada and Lufthansa and Dignari, which was really fun.
You did a great job, by the way.
Thank you. I don't believe you. I don't believe the people who say that, but it's nice
I
to
was
hear.
I was asked to say that.
But my point is that we were kept very busy. Obviously, we would have loved to talk to more people. Obviously, people have things that they can't always talk about on the record, but we were very happy to talk to a few people and have great conversations on the record for our show, which is what we're bringing you today. So let's start with Neville Pattinson from Thales and IBIA.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here and I appreciate you spending the time. I work for Thales Group. I'm head of the business development and strategic marketing of identity and biometric solutions. I'm also just been luckily appointed the chairman of the IBIA organization that co-hosts this event with Terrapin. So I am your conference chair today and happy to be here. Thank you.
So Neville is the new board chair of the IBIA, the International Biometrics and Identity Association, very important group for the industry. And yeah, he was elected to a 2-year term. So of course we started off just asking him about that.
That's what I'm hoping for. The previous incumbent had 6 years so he had
Oh,
three 2-year terms. I'm hoping for a 2-year term.
okay.
But we shall see. So
Yeah.
we're a manufacturers association, International Biometric and Identity Association. It's been around for several years. It's gone through various different incarnations of membership, but we're basically membered by various biometric and identity companies, where we get together to further the growth and the understanding and the use of biometric technologies in whatever application it may be, government or commercial. And we do have lobbying up on the Capitol Hill to try and explain to the lawmakers the ins and outs of biometric technology and how they work with identity. So we're a collective group that's really a voice for the industry, to try and bring some I'll say sanity to some of the crazy ideas that come out of Capitol Hill sometimes. They're wanting to ban the stuff outright. They're calling it bias and so on. It's our job to go up there and say what it really can do, and that it is actually very beneficial when used correctly and with the right guardrails. So the word facial recognition is probably the worst misunderstood term. As facial recognition to a biometric person means about a computer understanding that I've found a face and I'm going to try and recognize that face and match it to a face I already know. And therefore, I've become convinced that this is the same person that I already had in the system. But to the general public, they think it's some sort of tracking, surveillance. It's some sort of privacy invasion. They think we can tell if they're happy, if they're sad, what age they are, and and all these things that it really isn't. So facial recognition, we have to keep explaining, if used correctly, can help in many applications. And it's not something where we're trying to advocate surveillance. We're not trying to put cameras on the streets and have everybody's travels and faces captured wherever they go. That's not the case. This is a technology that can be used for things like we heard Customs and Border Protection talk about, easing the way through the country, already providing your face through your passport document or your visa document. They already know you're coming through the border due to a flight manifest or a manifest for a ship. They can be ready, and as you get off there, they can go, okay, here comes Neville. We captured his face. We can match it. We know he's coming. Great, welcome. Very easy way of proving who you are coming in the country, but also leaving the country, which is part of the 9/11 Commission's mandate that they put into place, that we need to biometrically identify people coming in and out of the country. Law enforcement is probably the biggest misconception of how facial recognition should be used. And we see a lot of legislative pressure about banning facial recognition for law enforcement. Well, I'm sorry, but law enforcement need to solve crimes. They've had mugshots for years in their books, and you sit there with probably the person who's had some unjust situation happen to them. They have to look through mugshots and try and identify the perpetrator. We've got the ability to help speed that process up, and by capturing the face of that individual, we can put it through a database and verify that that was someone we know or we don't know from their criminal history potentially. So law enforcement can use it for leads and lead generation. They're not going to prosecute somebody in the fact that the system matched them. They're going to say, great, we have a lead. Now let's go and find the real evidence about if they committed that act or whatever. So we need to make sure that law enforcement are enabled with this stuff. We don't want them banned, because that inhibits them from doing their job. A great case here was the January the 6th insurrection that happened on Capitol Hill. Hundreds of people really becoming, unfortunately, unruly in terms of the peaceful nature of the country. Facial recognition was used by police post that event to identify them and prosecute them and put them in jail. So to me, that's the right use of the technology. We're not trying to surveil people and say, yes, here comes Neville, we need to intercept him. Nothing like that. It's after the events happen, use the evidence and find those individuals and duly prosecute if necessary. So the facial recognition is badly understood. People think it's lots of things that it isn't. Hollywood doesn't help with the things they come up with. So there are limitations to the technology for sure, but we have really, the industry collectively has moved leaps and bounds in accuracy. There is very little any talk about bias or any ethical issues, any ethical background issues. And we are advocating up on the Capitol Hill for transparency, how this stuff is used, that it should be understandable, that people should, really understand that this is going to capture my face, and they'll use it to match, and then they'll throw it away, and it should be ethical. So transparent, understandable, and ethical are kind of three positions that we like to see in the industry promoted it within the way anybody's adopting biometric technology, including facial.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and I asked Neville to elaborate a little bit.
One of the misconceptions, I think, of many Americans that I talk to is they think the government is tracking them and wants to get in their business. If you're a law-abiding citizen, they really don't have any interest in you at all. It's only when you break the law that they're going to have an interest. So there is no big database, there's no big collection of information, there's no surveillance. It's only when you've committed a crime and perhaps there's evidence, video evidence, CCTV footage, that kind of thing, that can be used to then put through facial recognition systems to help identify and therefore, generate those leads. So we often see that, law enforcement need those tools to solve the crimes. But there is no suspicious government wants to get in your business. If you're a law-abiding citizen, they don't care. And they're not collecting anything about you. You're carrying a mobile phone probably with you, and on there is probably Google Tracker that's tracking every step you take and every little snail trail you make each day. I mean, goodness, you've already got mobile phone technology that's doing that. If you've got Fitbits and whatever, they're collecting that information where you've been running and biking and whatever. So there's already tracking technologies. If they really want to track you, they can do it much more effectively than trying to work out whose face is who's on the street, which is not something we ever want to see in this country.
Right.
China do that, and if you land in China and you go anywhere, they know who you are and where you're going. There was I remember hearing an article where a reporter landed and saw how long it would take them to find out where he was. 20 minutes from landing to his hotel, they knew where he was and what he was doing. So that is exactly not what we want. This is not a country that wants surveillance to that level. We want to use the tools effectively. So help our law enforcement do the work they need to do. And then hopefully, that accuracy of that technology will stop any false claims of false prosecution or whatever. There still needs to be humans involved that make that law, abiding decision that this is enough evidence beyond facial recognition that this is the person that committed that crime. So this technology is not putting people in jail as some of the Congress folks believe. It's very much needs to have human intervention.
I was also interested to hear what he had to say about interacting with opponents of facial recognition, both in Congress and from the advocacy world.
Capitol Hill is political. There are people with agendas. And there are some folks you can talk to, they will not listen and they will not care. They have an agenda, and that's what they're going to say. And we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. So we have to understand that some people are not going to listen. Others want to see successful use of the technology. They're prepared to invest in learning and understanding and helping codify the right guardrails that need to be in place. Privacy organizations, they need membership, they need funding. So generally they make a lot of noise about this technology, about how it can be misused. It's up to us as an industry organization to show how it can be used correctly with the correct guardrails. We heard from CBP this morning. I've spent a lot of time with them and TSA and a lot of other DHS components around their privacy impact assessments. They spend a lot of time defining how this technology will be used and in what guardrails and what the privacy retention will be, what the when it will be deleted, when it will be accessible, accessible by individuals, if they need to do any redress on it, all the controls you need, even to the fact that you need to consent to actually be part of this. So DHS components are really good at doing the right appropriate use of this technology for their mission. But the privacy groups will still go at them and saying this is an invasion of public, civil rights and so on, when it's not. TSA using it today to make your experience at the checkpoint easier. but some of the privacy organizations will still claim it's a violation of their privacy. They can opt out. They don't have to have their picture taken. Those caveats have already been put in place. So we want to see the majority of the population see this as a safe, privacy enhanced, ease of transportation, egress through the system, not a barrier, or something that's tracking them. Really, they don't care. They just want to know you are who you say you are when you're going to get on a plane or come through the border. Apart from that, you're on your own.
Yeah, that makes sense. We also asked him about what it's like working with the various federal agencies that were in attendance at Identity Week. There was like the CBP. I think the FBI was like right across from us, which was intimidating. Yeah, it was interesting what he had to say about that.
Well, the federal government is, thank goodness, an early adopter of this technology, and we really admire CBP's use at the border with facial technology. They've been doing fingerprints for 25 years for everybody coming in the country. They still collect fingerprints for visitors, but once you've got the fingerprints, we can then start to use the facial recognition instead. So it's a much more easier second and beyond encounter. So they've done that. TSA are now taking identity documents, not boarding passes, and verifying the identity documents good, getting the photo off that surface of that document and comparing it to your live face standing there to do a one-to-one match. The one-to-one matches are extremely accurate and extremely fast, and they're discarded immediately. They're not maintained. We now have mobile driver's licenses, which state governments are issuing, which have all this technology in your mobile phone, in your wallet, and you're able to present that through a QR code, and then through the magic of Bluetooth Low Energy, all the data is securely transmitted from your phone to their device, and they can get your high-res picture and all of your information. Or if it's just a alcohol and tobacco purchase, they can only get your face and maybe that you're over 21. So the digital driver's license offers all sorts of benefits moving forward. So the government is adopting the technology for the purposes of their mission, be it border, airport security, perhaps for ICE in terms of trying to identify immigrants, illegal immigrants, or people who are on a visa, overstays, that kind of thing. So each component of DHS has their uses. And the custody of a prisoner going from one place to another through DHS transportation through flight marshals and so forth, sheriffs, local sheriffs, they will all be using biometrics and facial to show that they are handing over the right individual through the custody of trust that they need to do. So the government's got many applications. I speak of a few, and our industry collectively is supplying those solutions and those capabilities to the government, and they are pioneering this. We hope to see commercial organizations suitably adopt, but we need perhaps different guardrails for that.
Right. And to conclude, we also asked Neville about how the major companies on the board of the IBIA actually work together to engage in dialogue with the government and with advocacy groups and organizations like that, because there's a lot of big companies on the board. It's not just Thales, it's IDEMIA, there's NEC, there's a bunch of heavy hitters. So I was really curious to hear how they all actually work together.
Sure, we will work together and come up with a common message. So we have a managing director, Robert Tappan, who's the managing director of IBIA. So he is going to be much more prominent as our spokesman moving forward. Now I'm taking on the chairmanship. As a vendor, I don't feel comfortable to be that spokesman quite so much. So Robert is now the neutral face. So as a organization, this is the power of why we have manufacturers associations. We're able to now work together in, under all the appropriate legal rules to find the right messaging, the right pitching to go up to Congress, where we can then collectively say, this is the accuracy, this is the use cases, this is where you want to put the guardrails in as a collective industry, which then can be codified, created into law, which helps the industry as a whole then compete for the RFPs that come out. So it's not that we're going up there as Thales or IDEMIA or NEC. If we go up there, Congress eyes glaze over. Yeah, you're up here as a as a company. We go up there as an industry association. The message is much more powerful.
United we stand.
Exactly. We're here to help you and educate you and make you do this correctly and make sure that it's done with all of the appropriate guardrails.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting conversation. Neville is a really nice guy, and we cover the IBIA quite a bit, and it was cool to get kind of kind of an insider's perspective, the ultimate insider's perspective on how that organization actually operates. So that was fascinating.
Yeah, and it was also really, really great to meet Terry Brenner from IDVerse. It's rare for us to get a chance to talk to someone from an identity tech vendor who's covering and focusing on the legal side of things. We talk about the legal side of the industry a lot on this show, so that was a really fascinating discussion as well.
Yeah, Terry was great.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Alex. Great to be sitting with you. Terry Brenner, Head of Legal Risk and Compliance for IDVerse Americas. A little bit about the company. We are a developer of ID verification technology. We do full flow, all proprietary technology, and it's a full process OCR of documents, document authentication, just document fraud analysis, and then moving into liveness and face matching. And then certain kind of tangential products around that. So that's a little bit about us.
So we started off with Terry just basically talking about how the legal landscape around biometrics and AI seems like kind of a Wild West. And we basically just appealed to him for help to take us by the hand and just help us understand what that looks like from a legal perspective.
Well, would it help if I just kind of stand back a little bit and kind of get the 10,000 foot view? Just to kind of give a sense. So I think what's exciting, or maybe not for everyone, but for me at least, is that we're in the middle of a process where we can see in slow motion how regulations are coming into place here around AI. And so if you stand back and you can see on a number of different levels how it's all happening. And so it's actually, I think it's a pretty exciting time for an industry around ID verification to be part of that. So the way that I see it is you have 4 blocks, 4 pillars, and really focusing on the US regulations and how it applies here. The first pillar would be the laws and regulations. So that would be where you have different federal laws that apply. And then in the US, obviously, states is very important. For example, you've got state privacy laws, but you don't necessarily have federal privacy laws. So laws and regulations, and that's kind of one pillar. Then you have the executive orders, which you point to, and the White House executive order from October 2023 was a great catalyst for agencies to go out and see what are the trigger points and hot areas, and then come back and kind of collate the data. So that's another area. We'll double click on that in a second. And then you have the enforcement actions, and that's kind of like the quick hand draw of federal government, where they can't put a bill together, but they can commission their agencies to go out there and put some agency guidelines together. So, for example, FTC has done this in a powerful way. May 2023, they did that around biometrics, use of biometrics, and then within 6 months they had an enforcement action, which is Rite Aid versus FTC. So, kind of setting the stick for everyone to in the room to behave. And then finally, litigation, which is exactly what you pointed to. You've got a statute, it's put in place in a state, couple combinations of things, private right of action, few class action lawyers, and then 11 years later, you've got millions of dollars of claims against countries. So that's also kind of, so put together those 4 pillars, that's kind of defining how AI is rolling through over the next couple of years.
And like with that, because it's so complicated, there's different state laws, there's the executive orders. What is like how big a team do you need working for like IDVerse to navigate that? Or like what can you tell us about that process working around those?
Well, I think to some extent it crosses into the question of risk and how you manage risk. You cannot completely manage risk. You just have to consider how you prioritize certain things over others and trying to apply best practices. So there's always something that is undone. But certainly you're always looking to points, heated points that are coming up, that, directives by, federal or state, wherever it may be. I am supported by a colleague who covers EMEA and APAC. And then over that, we have our SVP who also covers risk and compliance and ID security on a broader level. So I think those kind of touch points, we've got some great in-house expertise in terms of how to try and deal with these things. And certainly EMEA is a good indicator in terms of how things happen. The EU AI Act, which has recently gone into force, is setting the tone, and that's probably going to set the tone for a lot of states. So you just try and learn from that and see how you can implement best practices. And I guess we're small enough in the sense that we can control these and kind of set in place protocols and carry those through. We're not a 10,000 person company that is just, it's completely unwieldy. So, and starting with those practices from ground level, I think then that just builds those are just strong foundations and great principles.
I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, but I just imagine you get pulled into a number of customer meetings where they're basically demanding, or is IDVerse saying you need to know about the legal risks? What awareness level do you see on the part of clients about the legal risks?
So it's a good question. It works on two levels, depending on I don't want to call it the sophistication, but to some extent it is. We have large partners, and they have, we get onto a call and I'm surrounded by 15 people who are, from all different elements of privacy and regulation and compliance. So they're obviously heightened to what's going on, and AI has become something that's of, increasing concern to them. And we're filling out a lot of template responses and all that they send our way. So there it's giving them the comfort that as they move through their process, that they know that we're partners, are following the best protocol. At the same time, it also gives you opportunity with I'd say smaller, more direct clients who don't have that kind of legal expertise and support, where we can help them and support them. So whereas customer support may be one part about, okay, how are we processing transactions and making sure that we're giving you the best results for your front line of ID verifications. Also understanding the back end of it, what's happening on the compliance side. How can you comply? Are you thinking about AI? We've done this a lot around BIPA, right? It's a very basic thing. You just put in the right consents and follow this, and everyone's going to be fine. And so it's it works definitely in reassuring them, okay, well, we know what we're talking about, and we're protecting them too, because we're all in the same ecosystem. So it's to everyone's benefit.
And I was particularly interested to ask Terry his views on BIPA, considering how often we talk about it on the show, and specifically what he made of the recent amendment that was signed, kind of whether it's as big a deal as it seems.
So I think BIPA by itself has created enough, it's created enough heightened awareness by itself that a lot of companies have learned in terms of what they need to do. All right. So there's a consent, and there's 4 basic principles that you need to follow. And if you follow that, then that approach, then you are complying with the regulation. So I think from one perspective, the heat of activity that's going on around BIPA actions will kind of start to wane as people figure out what they need to do. Secondly, a lot of the cases that came up initially were around, for example, fingerprint type scenarios where you had employees who each time they checked in for work and logged in the fingerprint or something like that, then that was one instance. So definitely from that perspective, there will be less motivation for class action lawyers to have to institute a claim. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of frivolous, and I don't want to diminish what, the work that they're doing to some extent.
Of course.
People can condone class action lawyers, but it's like in any ecosystem, they keep the system also kind of healthy, right? So they've kind of made, well, if I'm going to get sued for a couple $1 million, then I need to consider how, consider what's my behavior. And you can't just blame that part of the US litigation legal system. But certainly, I think that there may be less interest. We've heard anecdotally that the number of claims has dropped off compared to the heat of, when it picked up 2021, 22, there's been a drop off in the number of actions. So the answer, in short or long, is yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to hear it from you.
Okay. Don't take that as authority, but
yeah.
I was also intrigued when Terry mentioned IDVerse had a code of ethics. So I definitely wanted to hear more about that before we ran out of time, because it's a refreshing thing when you just stumble across that from a company in this field.
Yeah, so I think the thing is, when we were talking earlier, we were talking about the 4 pillars, and it goes to your question. It's so unwieldy, right? Like, how do you deal with this? And when you're working on a global level, and there's a transaction from the US to Canada, and Canada take their privacy pretty seriously. So you've got to think about, well, what's the core of the business as well, right? Is it just like completely product sales driven? And not that that's a bad thing, that's what makes money, but what's kind of at the core in terms of how people are actually, what's kind of the innate quality of the business? And so one thing that's been important, and I'm certainly not one of the developers. I'm not one of the developers, but what's been core with the development of the product has been this zero bias oath, which we call the code zero bias oath, which we've implemented with our developers kind of at ground source, at T+0. So in the same way that you have a Hippocratic oath that has stood to the test of time for the medical profession, and is still kind of ingrained within, when doctors are swearing in today, this is something that kind of carries an expectation that if you're signing on, these are the expectations for the type of code that we're doing. Bias as a whole, we can have a whole other discussion around that, and what that means, and how companies have responded to improve the performance and to get to a zero bias stage. But that's got to be built into kind of the belief system of how people are developing the tech, because at the end of the day, the tech just rolls from there, and that's what gets sold into the product. So it's the core source of the company. So I think that's something for any business. Our clients too. They also should kind of take that into account. Again, it's about privacy and doing IDV in an effective way, to be as permissive as possible, to allow in the 98% of users who are genuine users, and give them the services they need. But at the same time, that it's effective enough to keep out the 2% that do have kind of improper motives.
Yeah.
Hope that answers the question.
I really like that. On the panel that I was just moderating, I was accused of getting philosophical, but I like, that is always like a great thing to see, I think.
Yeah.
So we should talk about that more sometime.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Great.
Sounds good.
In the meantime, thank you so much for coming and
Yeah,
talking.
thank you both, and I wish you all the best with ID Tech.
Thank you.
I don't know if we're allowed to promote that
no.
yet. Is that the big reveal?
No,
okay.
That should have been the big one.
Okay, all right.
We,
We'll build it up next.
Very grateful.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Okay,
Terry.
cheers.
So yeah, that was a really great chat with Terry. He's super nice, and just one of those cases where there's not enough time to get to everything you want to, but hopefully we'll be speaking to him again in the future.
Yeah, I sincerely hope so. And then to round things out, of course, friend of the pod, FaceTec's Jay Meier. It was our first time meeting him in person. He's been on the show multiple times. He's a funny guy. He's a really smart guy. He was essentially there, I think, at the show to announce FaceTec's big new solution, which is the UR code, which we have a in-depth feature article about if you want to check our news site. But you can hear about it here. It's fascinating. It's an amazing piece of technology, and so we started out with him just asking if he could explain it in like 2 minutes.
Well, I can't do anything. I can't talk about anything for only 1 to 2 minutes, but I'll try. So the problem is there's effectively two problems out in the ecosystem right now, right? And the first is that we cannot trust the identity credential. It's either, if it's a real credential, like a physical driver's license or something, it is likely to be fake as real. So in an IDV vendor's world where they do a selfie to driver's license check, they can't tell you if the driver's license is legitimate or not, which means that it could be fake, meaning it's my face and your identity data, and their selfie might actually confirm that the faces match. And at that point, I'm enrolling in the system as you, right? So we can't trust the credentials anymore. The PKI fallacy, on the other hand, says that just because you have this super effective, super secure digital cryptographic credential, that's bound to the device, it's irrefutable data integrity, irrefutable binding integrity to the device, that still doesn't tell you who's in control of the device that the credential is bound to. So the problems is that we can't trust the credential, and or we can't trust we know who's in control of the device. Okay. So this is a question of binding in both cases. What we really need to accomplish, what we've talked about, is binding the actual physical human being to the identity, right? We can bind them to a credential, but the credential might be fake. So that's a risk, right? The identity data that is most coveted is the identity data that's behind the firewall at the issuing authority. Like in the United States, the State Department issues passports. They do a background check on you before you get a passport. They have an identity profile for you with your picture behind their firewall in a database. That is the best, most highest confidence identity data we have about you. Or at the DMV in the United States, the driver's license is sort of the de facto national ID, right? So same thing. It's the data at the DMV that's important, not what's on the card, right? The problem is as FaceTec has done for a very long time and extraordinarily successfully, we've moved biometric data from the device to the database, where we can bind it to a verified identity profile. And then to authenticate, we can do the face match again and check it against the face map that's stored with the identity profile. And if they match, we know it's the right guy. But here's the problem. That's asking a government organization to actually get in the loop for your identity verification. So if you're opening a bank account and we do that, it basically means that we're there's a risk that the government could know that you're opening an account at that business. And so there's privacy implications, and we've been very successful with that in a commercial sense, right? But the government organizations, the stakeholders out there are worried about privacy, really in Europe more than anywhere else, but all over the place. Okay. So pinging the government database is not the best, the most ideal way to do it. The ideal way to do it is to be able to provide that same data integrity without having to ping the government database. So that means we have to move the data behind the government firewall, your identity profile. We have to move it into your control so that no one else can see it unless you allow them to see it. And that means that data has to be irrefutable. It cannot be corruptible. It cannot change, right? So that's what the UR code does. It gives the issuing authority the ability to give you the same data and the same relationship between biometric data and identity data in an irrefutable, immutable way that you control and can present to a relying party to verify who you are without having to ping the government database.
Yeah, I told Jay that we'd been writing about this, and I went and I saw his talk, and just when I thought that it was clicking and I was getting my legs under me, understanding this whole thing, Jay kind of announces that FaceTec is going to be giving away this product for free, which kind of threw me for a bit of a loop.
Well, it's true. we don't, I don't even want to call it a product. Okay. What it is the UR code is a QR code that includes biometric data and identity data that describes you, that is held behind the firewall at the issuing authority, right? And we're putting it in your control for you to give to whoever you want. You'd think it's revolutionary, and it solves a couple of huge problems, right? Can't trust the credential, can't trust, who's in control of the device. Well, now you can. So why we're giving it away? We're going to give it away. We don't call it a product. I'm calling it a protocol. Okay. This is like the last mile for identity management. It's the last problem to solve. Okay. This solves the problem that represents 85% of breaches, hacks, identity thefts, frauds, 85% of them worldwide. Okay. Yeah, we're good corporate citizens. We want to help humanity, blah, 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 but the truth of the matter is that if we give it away in a way that is not scary, like no vendor lock-in, okay, this doesn't force anybody to use FaceTec. Just, it doesn't force anybody to use FaceTec, okay? We're giving away the encoder. We're giving away the reader. We're giving away the QR codes themselves. And the relying party or the relying party or the issuing authority can use whatever liveness and biometric vendor they want. We hope they're going to use us. We think they should use us. But if we said you can only use us, they'd say pound sand, because we're not going to get locked into one vendor, right? So we had to make it this way. And think about the problem that it solves. This is a massive, massive, massive expansion of the market for liveness and remote biometric matching. We're just scratching the surface of the total addressable market for what we do. And this is going to unlock the rest of the market. If there's 5 companies that are pretty damn good at this stuff, and the total addressable market is measured in like tens of billions of dollars a year, that's 5 pretty damn big companies, right?
We were also interested to hear about the response that Jay was getting from government people at the show and like other people who were kind of just probably getting their first introduction to the UR code and the whole concept. And it's kind of like a tough thing to wrap your head around, but when you get how it works, it's really fascinating and compelling. So yeah, we were really curious to hear what the response was just on an immediate level at the show.
Yeah. FaceTec is pretty far out in front, that's just a fact. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. Okay. Like representatives from passport authorities at countries like running after me after I gave the speech. Okay. And other people from banks running after me to ask me questions about it. So they want to understand what it is, right? But their job is not just to understand the good parts about it. Their job is to understand the bad parts about it. Where is the risk for them? So they start digging in. Can you explain no vendor lockup? How is that actually true? Jay, you were from Wall Street. Are you kidding me? You're a profiteering bloodsucker. How can you possibly want to do it that way? So they want to explore it. And when they become comfortable with it, they say, let's set up a call and talk about it, right? And the thing about the UR codes is their simplicity and the elegance of the system and the undeniability of the satisfaction of the problem compared to the size of the problem. So everybody immediately gets this. This actually does solve the problem. So does it do what this clown Jay is saying it does? Let's explore that, right? So then we start a real conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's going to be busy, that's for sure. But it's fun. I mean, it's really exciting. So I appreciate you guys sitting and talking with me again. It's always a good deal.
Yeah, so always a pleasure talking with Jay, and we look forward to having him back on the show again soon to kind of go more in depth about the UR code. But for now, that's a wrap. Identity Week America, huge success. And for us, we want to just give a huge thanks to our friends at Identity Week. It was a great show.
Yeah, specifically, just want to shout out and give thanks to Moira, Molly, Evie, Johnny, Rob, and Noah. They were so pleasant to deal with. They were so helpful. They got us an extra chair, and they're just great. They put on a great show, and so it's a testament to their ability and their hard work.
They're a great team, and as tired as I am, I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah.